Chapter 1. The Dinner That Broke Me. I always thought endings came with shouting, broken plates, slammed doors. But that night, it came with silence, and the quiet sound of her fork against the plate. Elara sat across from me in her red dress, the one I bought her on our second anniversary. She wasn't smiling, not like she used to. Her eyes kept flicking down to her phone, lighting up every few seconds. I tried to break the tension. "You've barely touched your food," I said softly. "Is something wrong?" She set her fork down, slowly. "I need to tell you something." Those 6 words froze me in place. I forced a smile. "What is it?" Her voice trembled. I want a divorce." The world stopped, just like that. No buildup, no warning, just a knife straight through the chest. For a moment, I laughed. I actually laughed. "That's a weird joke." She didn't smile. "I'm not joking, Adrian." I looked at her hands, shaking slightly, her fingers twisting the napkin into knots. I wanted to ask 1,000 things, but all that came out was, "Why?" Her eyes flickered, guilt swimming behind them. Because I can't keep lying to myself." I swallowed hard. "About what?" She looked down. "Damon came back." The name hit me like ice water. Damon, the ex who left her 3 years ago, the man she swore she never wanted to see again. I laughed again, but my voice cracked. "You're leaving me for him?" "It's not what you think," she whispered. "He apologized. He said he changed. I still have feelings for him. I think I always did." Something inside me broke, quietly, invisibly. I sat there, nodding, pretending to understand, pretending the floor hadn't just disappeared beneath me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "So what was I? A substitute until he came back." Her eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, don't make this harder." "Harder?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're destroying our marriage, Elara. How could it get harder?" "Please," she whispered, almost pleading now. "I'm sorry. I can't pretend anymore." I stared at her. This woman I built my life around. The one I carried through sleepless nights, family fights, job losses. The woman whose father I helped when his company nearly went bankrupt. I wanted her to see what she was throwing away. I wanted to remind her how I saved her family from ruin. But the words wouldn't come. My chest hurt too much. Instead, I stood up. "You're serious?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "Then how did you want it to happen?" I said. "Through a text? A note on the counter?" "Please don't be cruel," she whispered. I laughed bitterly. "Cruel? I gave you everything, Elara. My time, my love, my future. And you're telling me not to be cruel." Her silence was answer enough. For a long moment, all I heard was the clinking of glasses from another table and the faint music from the restaurant speakers. I stared at her one last time, memorizing her face. The face I used to wake up to every morning. It felt like watching a stranger. Finally, I said, "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." Her lips parted as if she didn't expect me to agree so easily. "Adrian." "No," I cut her off. "You've already made your choice." I reached for my wallet, dropped a few bills on the table, and turned to leave. She whispered my name, but I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cold. I didn't remember where I parked. I just kept walking. Past the glowing streetlights, past couples holding hands, past everything that reminded me of what I'd just lost. Every step echoed like a countdown. It wasn't until I reached the car that my hands started shaking. I sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Elara wanted a divorce for her ex because he said, "Sorry." I let out a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. I thought of the nights we stayed up talking about our future, the promises, the whispered "I love yous," the way she once said she couldn't live without me. Now she wanted to live without me. I punched the steering wheel, once, hard. My knuckles burned, but the pain felt good. It was real. My phone buzzed. A message from Mira, her best friend. "Mira, are you okay?" No, I wasn't, but I typed, "Yeah." She told me. Her reply came instantly. "Mira, Adrian, I'm so sorry. I didn't think she'd actually do it." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Neither did I." I turned off my phone. The city lights blurred through the windshield. My reflection stared back. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, the faint trace of a man who thought love could fix everything. It was almost funny. I'd spent years thinking Elara was fragile, someone I needed to protect. But maybe I was the fragile one all along. Somewhere deep down, I still hoped she'd call, that she'd take it back, that this was just a nightmare I could wake up from. But the phone stayed silent, and in that silence, I realized something I didn't want to face. The woman I loved wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never really was. Chapter 2. What She Took From Me. For days, I didn't leave the apartment. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her coffee mug still sat by the sink. Even her perfume lingered in the hallway, like she'd only stepped out for a moment and would walk back in any second. But she didn't. It's strange how silence can scream louder than any argument. Every corner of our home felt like a graveyard, filled with the ghosts of promises she'd buried. I tried to stay busy. I cleaned, worked late, went for long drives. But every time I came home, her absence hit me like a wave. One night, I found myself staring at our wedding photo. We looked so happy. I remember the way she laughed when I smeared cake on her cheek. That smile. I used to think it meant everything. Now I just saw lies. I poured myself a drink, even though I'd promised her I wouldn't. It's just one, I muttered. But one became two, then three. By the fourth, I was talking to her photo. "Do you even remember what I gave up for you, Elara?" I whispered. "How I paid off your father's debt when his company was about to collapse. How I skipped that promotion because you didn't want to move cities." The photo didn't answer. It didn't have to. Everything I'd done for her, every sacrifice, suddenly felt like a joke. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Mira's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but something in me needed to hear another voice. "Hey," I answered, my voice rough. "Adrian, you sound awful," she said softly. "Yeah," I said with a dry laugh. "Divorce does that to a guy." She hesitated. "Listen, I didn't want to say anything before, but there's something you should know." I frowned. "What?" "Elara's been talking to Damon for months, long before that dinner." My grip tightened on the phone. "What are you saying?" "She told everyone they reconnected by accident, but that's not true. I saw messages. They planned this." The room spun. I pressed a hand to my forehead. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." Mira sighed. She said she needed closure, but I think she just wanted to feel like she mattered to him again. I laughed bitterly. So I was the replacement, a filler, until he showed up again. "Adrian." "It's fine," I said quickly. "At least now I know the truth." She paused. "You don't sound fine." "I'm not," I admitted quietly. "But I will be." We stayed silent for a moment before she said softly, "You deserved better. She's going to regret it." Maybe. But right then, I didn't care about her regret. I cared about my own. After the call, I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened the top drawer. Her jewelry box sat there. Inside, the necklace I gave her on her birthday, the one she said she'd never take off. It still had my initials on the back. I clenched my jaw and dropped it into the trash. That night, I gathered every photo, every letter, every little piece of her that I kept, and tossed them into a metal bin on the balcony. I watched as the flames caught, flickering against the dark sky. The firelight danced over her smiling face before it curled into ash. It should have hurt. It didn't. It felt like breathing again. But even as I stood there, part of me whispered, "You still love her." And maybe I did. But love isn't supposed to feel like this. When the flames died, I sat down, staring at the ashes. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. "Adrian, it's Ryan. Can we talk?" Ryan, her younger brother, the one who always called me Big Bro at family dinners. For a moment, I thought about ignoring him. But something told me this wasn't just a friendly check-in. I typed back, "Sure. What's this about?" "Ryan, it's important. About my family." I stared at the screen, my heart suddenly heavy again. What now? Another debt? Another favor? Another way to use me until I'm empty? I tossed the phone onto the couch and rubbed my temples. For the first time, I saw how much she'd taken from me. Not just money, not just love, but years of trust and energy I'd never get back. I had built my world around her, and she'd walked away like it meant nothing. But as I sat there in the flickering light of dying embers, a small voice inside me whispered something new, something cold, steady, and unfamiliar. Maybe it's time to stop being the man who gets left behind. I didn't know what Ryan wanted to say, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to be anyone's safety net again. Chapter 3. The family's secret. Ryan showed up the next day, unannounced. When I opened the door, he stood there with dark circles under his eyes, gripping a backpack like he was afraid I'd slam the door in his face. "Ryan," I said, "what's going on?" "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around the apartment like it was haunted. Maybe it was, haunted by his sister's ghost. "Coffee," I offered. He shook his head. "No thanks. I don't have much time." That got my attention. I sat down across from him. "So, what's this about? Your text said something about your family." He swallowed hard. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't even be here, but you deserve to know." I leaned forward. "Know what?" He hesitated, rubbing his hands together. "Elara didn't just ask for a divorce because of Damon." I felt my chest tighten. "Then why?" He looked up, guilt flashing across his face. "Because of Dad's company. It's collapsing again." I blinked. "What?" He nodded miserably. "He made bad investments, loans he couldn't pay back. It's worse than last time. He was hoping you'd step in again, but Elara told him you wouldn't." I stared at him, the words sinking in slowly, painfully. "So she left me to avoid asking for help?" Ryan hesitated. "Partly. She didn't want you to see the family fall apart again. She said you'd only get dragged down with us." I laughed bitterly. "Dragged down? I already was dragged down, Ryan. I bailed them out once. I paid their debts. I gave up years of my life for that family." "I know," he said quickly. "I told her she was being unfair, but she said she couldn't handle the shame of owing you again. She thought leaving was the cleanest way." "Cleanest?" I repeated. "She left me for her ex. How's that clean?" He looked away. "I think she thought it would make it easier for you to move on, if you hated her." I stared at him in disbelief. "So she destroyed our marriage out of pity?" Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood up, pacing the living room. The truth hit me like a storm. She hadn't left just because she loved someone else. She'd left because she was too proud, too ashamed, too afraid to let me see her family fail again. And instead of trusting me, she chose to lie. I felt something in me shift, not anger this time, but clarity. "She always said love was about honesty," I muttered. "Guess that was just another thing she didn't mean." Ryan stood awkwardly. "I'm sorry, Adrian. I know you didn't deserve any of this. I just thought you should know before you hear it from someone else." I nodded slowly. "Does she know you're here?" He shook his head. "No. If she finds out, she'll lose it, but she's not doing great either. Damon's back in her life, but I don't think it's going the way she hoped." I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "He's using her. She doesn't see it yet, but I do. He's been asking her about money, connections, that kind of thing." A bitter smile formed on my lips. "Perfect. They deserve each other." Ryan winced. "Don't say that." "Why not?" I said coldly. "She left me to chase a man who dumped her once, just as her father's business was falling apart. She made her choice." He sighed. "I just wanted to warn you, things might get messy soon." "Messy?" I asked. He looked toward the door. "Dad's in trouble. Serious trouble. If the company goes down, a lot of people will go with it. And Elara, she might come to you again." I leaned back, arms crossed. "If she does, she'll find out something important." Ryan frowned. "What's that?" I met his eyes. "That I'm not her safety net anymore." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "I get it. I really do." After he left, I stood by the window, watching him disappear down the street. My thoughts spun in circles. Guilt, anger, disappointment. Part of me wanted to believe Elara had good intentions, that she left to protect me. But if she truly loved me, she would have trusted me to face it with her. Instead, she chose to face it with a liar. I poured another drink and sat down, staring at the city lights. Her family's empire, built on arrogance and borrowed money, was crumbling again. And this time, I wasn't going to save them. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice. But now I realized it had made me blind. Blind to the way they saw me. Not as a husband, not as a man, but as a lifeline. A convenient one. I took a deep breath, letting the anger burn out until only calm remained. If she thought walking away would spare me pain, she was wrong. It didn't save me. It changed me. And when she came crawling back, I'd be ready to show her who I really was. The man who finally stopped begging to be loved. Chapter 4. Whispers and regrets. A week passed after Ryan's visit, but his words kept echoing in my mind. Elara didn't leave me out of love. She left out of fear. Somehow, that felt worse. I tried to focus on work, but my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages I didn't want to read. People asking about the divorce, about Elara, about her father's collapsing company. I ignored them all. Then, one afternoon, as I was packing up to leave the office, I saw her best friend, Mira, waiting near the lobby. She looked nervous, like someone carrying bad news. "Mira," I said, walking over, "what are you doing here?" She gave a small, forced smile. "I had to see you in person. It's about Elara." Of course it was. We went to the cafe across the street, the same one Elara and I used to go to every Sunday. The smell of coffee hit me like a memory I didn't want. As soon as we sat down, Mira said quietly, "You were right about Damon." I frowned. "What about him?" "He's not back because of love," she said. "He's broke, Adrian, completely broke. His company went under last year. He saw Elara's family as his way out." I let out a sharp laugh. So he came crawling back, and she actually believed him. Mira nodded. She wanted to believe him. She was desperate for something that wasn't falling apart. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. She said Damon made her feel alive again. I stared into my cup. "Alive," I repeated. Interesting word for someone drowning. Mira leaned forward. "She's not doing well, Adrian. Her father's company is sinking fast, and Damon's been pushing her to ask you for help." I raised an eyebrow. "Ask me?" "Yeah," she said softly. "Apparently Damon told her Adrian owes you at least that much." I clenched my fists. "I owe her nothing." "I know," Mira said, "but she doesn't see it that way. She's panicking." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the cafe filled the silence between us. Mira finally said, "You still care, don't you?" I looked at her. Care? I paused, then sighed. "I don't know. I cared once. Maybe too much. But now, I just want peace." Mira smiled faintly. "That's a good answer." I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me something, Mira. Why are you telling me all this? You're her best friend." She looked down. "Because I saw what she did to you, and because you didn't deserve it." I told her the same thing. I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She hesitated before saying, "Just don't let her drag you back in. If she reaches out, walk away. Promise me that." I smiled sadly. "I've already promised myself." After Mira left, I sat there for a long time, watching the rain hit the windows, Damon's motives, Elara's fear, her family's collapse. It was all fitting together, like a puzzle I never wanted to solve. That night, I got the call. I'd been expecting. It was her. Her voice was quiet, shaky. "Adrian, can we talk?" I almost hung up, but something in her tone, a mix of regret and exhaustion, made me pause. "What about?" I asked flatly. She hesitated. "Everything." I leaned back on the couch. "You mean your ex or your father's company?" She went silent. I could hear her breathing through the line. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Neither was what you did to me." "I know," she said quickly. I thought I was doing the right thing." "For who?" I asked. "You. Him. Your family?" She didn't answer. "You told me once that love means facing things together," I said quietly. "But you ran the moment things got hard. Was that love too?" Her breath hitched. "Adrian, please." I cut her off. "Don't call me again unless you know what you actually want." Then I ended the call. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone. My heart was racing, but not from pain, from calm. It was the first time I'd ever ended a conversation with her on my terms. The storm outside grew heavier, thunder rumbling in the distance. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped inside it. I felt like I was watching it from a distance. Elara could drown in her own choices. I had already learned how to swim. Chapter 5. The rumor mill. By Monday morning, the whispers had already started. In business, silence spreads faster than scandal, because silence means scandal. And right now, the entire city seemed to be whispering about Elara's family. I didn't have to go looking for it. It found me. Over coffee, two of my colleagues were talking near the break room. "Did you hear about the Lindens?" One asked. "Word is their investors pulled out. The company's bleeding millions." "Yeah," the other said, lowering his voice. Apparently, her husband or ex-husband is involved somehow. The one who left his own company for her? They both laughed quietly, the way people laugh when they think they're safe from consequence. I just sipped my coffee and said nothing. That was how I survived now. In silence. By noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't gossip. It was confirmation. An old client forwarded me an article. Linden Industries under investigation for financial misconduct. There it was. Black and white, clean and final. I scrolled down. Elara's father was stepping down for health reasons. Damon, her ex, was listed as a consultant whose activities were being reviewed. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It was happening faster than even Mira predicted. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even satisfied. But instead, there was just this hollow quiet inside me, because once that name, Linden, meant something to me too. It meant home. It meant her. Now it was just another headline. Around 3, my assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Cole, there's someone here to see you." I didn't look up. "Tell them I'm busy." "She said you'd say that." I froze. "Elara?" She nodded. For a second, I considered pretending I wasn't there. But some part of me, maybe curiosity, maybe weakness, said, "Let her in." When Elara stepped into the room, I barely recognized her. The poise, the confidence, gone. Her hair was loose, her eyes tired, makeup smudged from lack of sleep. The expensive white coat she always wore was wrinkled like it had been grabbed off the floor. She closed the door softly behind her. "Adrian," she said, her voice low. "I didn't know where else to go." I stayed seated. "You shouldn't have come here," she swallowed. "Please just let me explain." "There's nothing left to explain." She stepped closer. "You were right. About everything. About Damon, my father, all of it." I didn't respond. "He's gone," she whispered. "Damon took what little we had left and disappeared. My father, he's in the hospital. The company's collapsing and everyone's blaming me." I leaned back, studying her. "And now you've come to me." Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know where else to go. "Funny," I said quietly. "That's exactly how I felt the night you told me you wanted a divorce." Her lips trembled. "I thought you'd hate me." "I did," I said. "But hate fades. Disappointment doesn't." She closed her eyes, shaking slightly. "I made a mistake, Adrian, a terrible one." I sighed, leaning forward. "No, Elara, you made a choice, and now you're living with it." She opened her mouth to speak, but I stood before she could. "Do you want money? Is that why you're here?" Her face twisted. "No, I don't want your money." "Then what?" I asked. "Forgiveness? Sympathy?" "I just wanted to hear your voice," she said weakly. "One more time." That stopped me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavy, full of everything that could have been said years ago, but wasn't. Finally, I said, "You heard it, now go." She looked up, tears falling silently. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "You just never saw me clearly before." She hesitated, then nodded, walking to the door. But before she left, she turned back. "If I ever mattered to you at all, please don't tell anyone what you know about the company. It could ruin what's left." I met her gaze. "Elara, it's already ruined." She blinked, as if realizing I wasn't talking about the company anymore. Then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. For a long while, I stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. The sunlight had shifted, leaving half the room in shadow. I thought of the girl who once made me believe in forever, and the woman who came back asking for shelter from a storm she helped create. And I realized something simple, painful, and true. Sometimes people don't come back because they love you. They come back because they've finally run out of places to hide. Chapter 6. The letter she shouldn't have sent it came 2 days later in an envelope without a name. No return address, no sender, just my name, written in Elara's handwriting, neat, elegant, and trembling. For a long while, I just stared at it on my desk. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Another part, the weaker, curious part, needed to know what she could possibly say now. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, written on soft cream paper that smelled faintly of the perfume she used to wear. The one she said made her feel safe. I unfolded it slowly and began to read. Adrian, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this, but I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see the moment I asked for that divorce. The look in your eyes when I said Damon's name. I thought I was saving myself. Instead, I destroyed the only person who ever truly cared for me. I was proud. I thought love would always wait for me, but I was wrong. I don't want you to pity me, but I need you to know Damon used me. He promised my family's safety in exchange for your company's secrets. I thought I could protect my father, my family, by giving him what he wanted, but I didn't realize what I was really giving away was you. When you left, the world didn't punish him. It punished me. If I could go back, I wouldn't ask for your forgiveness. I'd ask for one more chance to stay silent when I should have trusted you. Elara. I finished reading, then just sat there. The words blurred. I didn't cry. I hadn't done that in years, but something deep inside me ached like an old wound reopening. So that was it. That was the truth I never got. She didn't leave me because she stopped loving me. She left because she thought she had to. A noble betrayal. The worst kind. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. Somewhere between anger and mercy, I felt empty. I remembered her face in my office, the trembling voice, the tears, the way she said, "You've changed." Maybe she was right. The man she left behind wouldn't have survived this kind of pain. The man sitting here now didn't feel it the same way anymore. Still, I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and locked it in my desk drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I couldn't throw it away. That night, Mira called. "You heard?" she asked. "Heard what?" "Linden Industries filed for bankruptcy. Damon's name is all over the investigation." I closed my eyes. "And Elara?" "Under scrutiny, but she's not the one they're after." I stayed silent. "Adrian," she continued, softer now, "are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine." She sighed. "Fine doesn't sound fine." I smiled faintly. Maybe it's not supposed to. When the call ended, I stood by the window. The city lights shimmered below like stars trapped in glass. I remembered the night Elara and I first moved into our apartment, back when we were still dreaming, still stupid enough to believe love could fix everything. We used to sit by the same kind of window and promise each other forever. Now, forever was just another word that lost its meaning. A soft knock broke my thoughts. My assistant peeked in. "Mr. Cole, someone dropped this off for you. Said it was urgent." Another envelope. Another piece of the past. This one wasn't from Elara. The handwriting was different. Sharp, cold. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper read, "You should know the truth about how your company was destroyed." The photograph showed Damon standing beside Elara's father at a party, shaking hands with a man I recognized instantly, one of my old business partners. My jaw tightened, so it hadn't been Elara alone. The betrayal ran deeper, and now I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge anymore, or answers, because sometimes the line between the two disappears completely. I looked again at the photo, at Damon's smirk, at my former partner's smile, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake, the kind of awake that comes before a storm. I whispered to myself, "You thought you took everything from me, Damon, but you left me one thing, time. And time, in the hands of a man who's lost everything, can be more dangerous than power." Chapter 7. The Last Move. I didn't sleep that night. The photograph lay on my desk like a wound that refused to close. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. Damon's smirk, my ex-partner's handshake, and the quiet satisfaction of men who believed they'd already won. They thought the fire had gone out in me years ago. They were wrong. By dawn, my mind was clear. Too clear. Revenge doesn't come from rage. Rage burns fast. Revenge, real revenge, grows in silence. I spent the morning going through old files, company records, investment statements, deals I hadn't looked at since before the divorce. Every paper was a reminder of what I lost and who took it. At 8, Mira walked in with her usual black coffee. She stopped when she saw the mess on my desk. "Adrian," she said slowly, "what are you doing?" I looked up, finishing something I should have done years ago. Her eyes narrowed. "You found something, didn't you?" I handed her the photo. "Look at the man on the right." She frowned. "That's Victor Hale, your old co-founder." "Exactly." Her gaze lifted to mine. He was working with Damon? And Elara's father. The whole collapse. The lawsuits, the stolen patents, the media smears. It wasn't random. They built it together. Mira let out a low whistle. That's dangerous. Knowledge. So is silence, I said. She sighed, rubbing her temples. What's the plan? I'm not going to the police. Not yet. Then what? I'll let them destroy themselves. Her eyebrows rose. You're serious? Completely. I turned my screen toward her. Spreadsheets, company transfers, and ghost accounts I'd traced through encrypted files. They hid millions offshore. I can prove it. Mira exhaled slowly. You're playing with fire. Good, I said. Let them burn. By evening, the world outside looked strangely calm, but inside, everything was in motion. I sent a series of anonymous files to 3 major media outlets, nothing directly incriminating, but enough to raise questions, enough to make them start digging. Then I called one number I hadn't dialed in years. When Victor's voice came on the line, smooth and arrogant as ever, I almost smiled. Adrian, he said, pretending surprise, didn't expect to hear from you. I'm sure you didn't. To what do I owe the honor? I thought we should talk. About the past. A pause. You mean the company? I mean the part you sold to Damon Linden. The part that was never yours to sell. Silence. Then a soft laugh. You can't prove that. I don't have to, I said calmly, because someone else will. You see, Victor, the world loves scandals, especially when they involve people like you. He chuckled again, but this time it was forced. You're bluffing. Maybe, but in the morning when the press starts calling, you'll know whether I was or not. And I hung up. It felt light, clean, like breathing after being underwater too long. 2 days later, the first headline appeared. Corporate fraud allegations emerge against former Hale and Linden executives. It spread like wildfire. News stations, business blogs, online forums, everyone was talking. Damon tried to deny it at first. Then, when the evidence started surfacing, he went quiet. Victor Hale disappeared completely. And Elara, she didn't speak to the press. She didn't defend herself. She just vanished from the headlines like she wanted to disappear from the world. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. But karma, I've learned, never ends neatly. One evening, Mira came into my office holding a small brown package. This just came in. No sender again. I frowned. Another letter? She nodded. Want me to open it? I shook my head. No, I'll do it. Inside was a flash drive and a single note. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You were the only one who ever told me the truth. I stared at it for a long time before plugging it into my computer. There were videos, dozens of them, meetings, documents, proof of everything. Damon's deals, Victor's fraud, Elara's father signing off on illegal transfers. She had recorded everything. She'd been gathering evidence, maybe to protect herself, maybe to make things right. For the first time, I didn't know whether to hate her or pity her. I watched one clip twice. It showed Damon laughing, boasting about how he'd handled me, how easy it was to manipulate Elara. Every word tightened the knot in my chest. When the video ended, I closed my laptop slowly and said to no one in particular, "It's over." Mira looked at me quietly. "Is it?" I nodded. "For me, yes. For them, not yet." She hesitated. "What are you going to do with it?" I smiled faintly. "Nothing. I don't have to. The world will do the rest." That night, I drove home through the city, lights blurring like ghosts in the rain. I thought of Elara again. Her face, her voice, her letter. I wondered where she was, and if she'd ever find peace after everything. Maybe that was her punishment, to live with the weight of her choices, and mine was to live with the memory of a love that once could have saved us both, if we hadn't been so proud. When I reached home, I turned off the lights, sat in the dark, and whispered into the silence. "You were wrong, Elara. Love doesn't die. It just changes shape until we can't recognize it anymore." And somewhere deep down, I hoped she heard me. Chapter 8. When she returned to say goodbye. It was raining when she came back, the kind of rain that feels endless, soft, cold, steady, the kind that drowns out every other sound except your own thoughts. I was sitting by the window again, reading the same line in the same book for the third time, when I heard the knock. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. When I did, Elara stood there, soaked, shivering, her coat clinging to her like paper. Her hair was darker from the rain, and her eyes, they weren't the same eyes that once looked at me with pride. They were hollow now, quiet, defeated. "Adrian," she whispered. My throat went tight. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said, "but I needed to see you. One last time." I stepped aside silently, and she walked in. She stood near the couch, dripping onto the rug. I offered her a towel, but she didn't take it. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper. "They froze our accounts," she said quietly. "The house, the company, it's all gone." I said nothing. "I sold my car," she continued. "My father's in debt. Damon's facing trial. I don't even have a lawyer anymore." I crossed my arms. "And why tell me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it," she said, her voice breaking. "You deserve to know that every person who hurt you has finally fallen." I stared at her. "Do you think that makes me happy?" Her eyes met mine, sharp, wet, pleading. "Doesn't it?" "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't." She looked down, biting her lip. "I didn't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you that I meant every word in that letter." I didn't respond. "I know I ruined everything," she whispered. "But when I heard your voice the other day, I realized something. You were the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered. Not because of my name, not because of my family, just because of me." The rain outside grew louder. I took a slow breath. "Elara, why now? Why come back?" She hesitated. "Because I'm leaving the country. Tomorrow." "Running, escaping," she said softly. "From the noise, from the shame, from myself." I nodded slowly. "And you wanted closure." "I wanted peace," she corrected. We stood there in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that feels heavier than words. Finally, I said, "You won't find peace by running." She gave a weak smile. "Maybe not, but staying here, where every corner reminds me of what I destroyed, that's worse." Her gaze moved around the apartment. "You kept it the same." "Mostly," I said. "Some things aren't worth changing." She stepped closer. "Like us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman she'd become. Broken, fragile, yet somehow still proud. "Us?" I said quietly. "There's no us anymore, Elara. There's just what's left." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know. I just wanted to hear you say it." I exhaled slowly. "Then hear this too. I don't hate you anymore." Her breath caught. "You don't?" "No, I used to. But hate ties you to someone as much as love does. I've carried you long enough." She looked away, trembling. "Then maybe I can go in peace now." Before I could reply, she reached into her bag and took out a small box, old, wooden, with a faded ribbon tied around it. "What's this?" I asked. "Something I kept all these years," she said. "Something that still belongs to you." I opened it. Inside was my old wedding ring, the one I left behind the night she asked for the divorce. I stared at it in silence. "It was the only thing I couldn't sell," she whispered, "not because it was expensive, but because it still felt alive." I closed the box carefully. "You should have thrown it away." "I tried," she said, "but every time I did, I couldn't." I looked at her, drenched, shaking, holding on to something that died long ago, and I realized this was her punishment, living in the ruins of her own choices. I placed the box back in her hand. "Keep it. As a reminder." She nodded slowly, her shoulders trembling. "Goodbye, Adrian," she said softly. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as she walked to the door, paused once, then stepped out into the rain. The sound of the door closing was quieter than I expected, almost gentle. For a long time, I stood there, listening to the rain hit the window. Then I whispered, "Goodbye, Elara," and for the first time in years, the word didn't hurt. Chapter 9. The quiet after the storm. It's strange how silence can be louder than thunder. A week had passed since Elara left, and the rain hadn't stopped. The city looked washed clean, as if it had decided to forget. I hadn't seen her again. No messages, no letters, no new envelopes waiting on my desk. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows an ending too long delayed. I went back to work, to my routines. The world hadn't changed. Meetings still started late. Coffee still tasted bitter. The elevator still stopped on every floor, and strangers still avoided eye contact. But inside me, something was different. Something had shifted. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. It was more like acceptance. For years, I carried anger like armor. I told myself I was healing, but really, I was holding on because the pain was all I had left of her. Now, even that was gone. One evening, Mira dropped by my office. She didn't knock, as usual. "You look lighter," she said. "Do I?" She nodded, sitting across from me. "You do, like a man who finally stopped fighting ghosts." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's because the ghosts finally stopped fighting back." She tilted her head. "You got closure." "Not the kind I expected," I said. "But yes." Mira hesitated, then asked, "Do you think she's okay?" I looked out the window. The city lights shimmered against the rain. "I think she's surviving, and maybe that's enough." Mira studied me for a moment. "You could still find her, you know. Talk. End things properly." "I already did," I said quietly. "Just not with words." She smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time you start living again." That night, I walked home instead of driving. The streets were slick with rain, reflections of neon and headlights blurring under my feet. I passed the old cafe Elara and I used to go to. It was still open, different owner now, new name, but the same smell of roasted beans and warm bread. For a moment, I almost went in. Then I didn't. Some places aren't meant to be revisited. They're meant to stay where they belong, in memory. When I got home, I found the small wooden box sitting on my table. I didn't remember bringing it there. Maybe Mira moved it when she cleaned up my desk. I opened it slowly. The ring was still inside. The gold was dull now, scratched from time, but somehow it looked softer, kinder, like a symbol that no longer carried pain, just history. I held it between my fingers, then whispered, "You can rest now." And for the first time in years, I meant it. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I packed a small bag and left the city. No destination, no plans, just movement. As the train carried me out past the skyline, I watched the buildings shrink and blur. The farther I went, the lighter I felt. I thought about everything that had happened. The love that turned to betrayal. The betrayal that turned to revenge. The revenge that turned to silence. It was strange how the story changed meaning once it ended. For so long, I believed I was the victim, the one who lost everything. But now I understood. I wasn't the victim. I was the witness to my own rebirth. Elara's betrayal destroyed the man I used to be, but it also forced me to become the man I should have been all along, and that was her final gift. The train stopped in a small coastal town by evening. The sea stretched out before me, gray and calm. The air smelled like salt and rain. I found a small inn by the shore and checked in for the night. The owner, an old woman with kind eyes, handed me a key and said, "Storm's ending soon. You're lucky. Tomorrow will be clear." I smiled. I think it already is. Later, I stood on the balcony, listening to the waves crash softly against the rocks. I took the ring from my pocket one last time. The metal felt warm against my palm. For a long moment, I held it up to the fading light. And then, with a deep breath, I let it go. The ring fell quietly into the sea, vanishing beneath the surface without a sound. And just like that, the last tie between us was gone. They say forgiveness sets you free, but I think that's only half true. It's not forgiveness that frees you. It's understanding. Understanding that sometimes people break you because they're broken themselves. Understanding that love doesn't always end with hate. Sometimes it ends with silence. And understanding that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to remember differently. As I watched the horizon fade into dusk, I whispered into the wind, not for her, but for myself. I'm done holding on. And somewhere between the waves and the quiet, I realized I truly was. Chapter 10. The Epilogue. Years later. 5 years have passed since I last saw Elara. It feels longer, like another lifetime. Sometimes, when I look at myself in the mirror, I barely recognize the man staring back. The gray in my hair, the quiet in my eyes, they're not signs of age. They're reminders of everything I've survived. After I left the city, I never went back. I opened a small design firm by the sea. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep me busy. People here don't know my past. To them, I'm just Adrian, the quiet man who sketches buildings and watches the tides. And that's all I need to be. I used to crave revenge. Now, I crave peace. This morning, the sun rose slowly over the ocean. The light hit the waves like melted glass. I made coffee, stepped out to the balcony, and let the wind carry the salt into my lungs. Every morning, I still wait for that feeling, the heavy ache in my chest, the anger, the what-ifs. But they don't come anymore. Just quiet. Just the hum of life continuing, softly and endlessly. I thought I'd never stop thinking about her, but over time her face became less sharp in my mind, more like a watercolor painting, fading around the edges. I no longer dream of her voice. Now I dream of the sea. Around noon, I went into town to meet a client. The cafe where we agreed to meet was new, small, with white walls and the smell of cinnamon and fresh pastries. As I stepped in, I froze. Behind the counter stood a woman with long chestnut hair tied back loosely. Her movements were slower than they used to be, more deliberate. But when she turned, I saw her eyes, still the same. Elara. For a second, the world stopped moving. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw the moment recognition hit her. The air between us tightened like a pulled string. "Adrian," she said softly. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Elara," I said, keeping my tone calm. "It's been a while." "5 years," she whispered. "You look different." "So do you," I said. "How have you been?" She hesitated. "Surviving. The company's gone. Father passed last year. I started this place to stay afloat." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "You're not, but thank you for saying it." Silence filled the space between us. It wasn't bitter, just heavy with things left unsaid. "I heard you moved away," she said. "That you disappeared." "I didn't disappear," I said quietly. "I just stopped chasing ghosts." Her eyes lowered. "I deserve that." I shook my head. "You deserve to find yourself. Maybe this is how." For a moment, we just stood there, surrounded by the faint clatter of cups and low music. She seemed smaller now, gentler. Not the woman who destroyed me, but the one who used to laugh at midnight in the rain. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not the way I used to." "How do you think of it now?" I smiled faintly, like a story that taught me everything I didn't know I needed. Her eyes shimmered, and for a second I saw regret flicker across her face. Not the selfish kind, the human kind. "I never said I was sorry," she whispered. "You just did," I said. When I left the cafe, I didn't look back. The wind was warm, the sunlight soft, and for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't carrying her shadow anymore. Some people spend their lives searching for closure. I found mine in letting go. Maybe she would rebuild her life. Maybe she'd never find peace. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I'd already made peace with the truth that not every ending is meant to hurt. Some are meant to free you. That night, as the sea whispered beneath my window, I wrote one last line in my journal. She demanded a divorce for her ex, but what she really gave me was my freedom. And as I closed the book, I smiled. Not because the story was perfect, but because it finally ended where it should. In peace.